Hi everyone, and welcome to the second video of the Alzheimer's prevention series. If in the first video we talked about sugar and why it's nearly impossible for most people to quit sugar in today's culture and why Alzheimer's has come to be regarded as type 3 diabetes, today I would like to continue the discussion on nutrition and how it can impact our risk of developing Alzheimer's, and I would like to talk about bad fats and how bad fats can significantly increase our risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Before diving into this topic, I would like to share with you a few thoughts on disease prevention more generally. I was having a very interesting conversation with a colleague from work about the rising incidence of breast cancer among young women in their 20s, in their 30s, in their early 40s, and how unfortunate it is that we don't have awareness campaigns and more information on how we can prevent breast cancer, or at least reduce our risk of breast cancer. According to statistics, almost 70% of all breast cancer cases are due to environmental factors, and environmental factors can be controlled, and we can only control them with prevention. Unfortunately, we don't think about prevention enough. We don't understand prevention enough. Most people don't even believe in prevention. Prevention is the only way in which we can take our power back and we can control what happens to our bodies and to our health. And this is so worth it, because we don't want to be in that life-threatening situation where we need to do chemo, we need to do radiation, and we need to fight for our lives in a very unequal battle. We don't want to be there. And if we can invest some of our time and our energy into preventing a disease, why not? What do we have to lose? As you know, I'm very passionate about preventing Alzheimer's, and the truth is that most of the strategies that I'm using to prevent Alzheimer's are also useful to prevent breast cancer and other types of cancer, because leading a healthy life, eating the right things, doing physical exercise, having a sleep hygiene, managing our stress, these are ways in which we can protect our health in a more general manner and prevent many types of diseases. I know that some progress has been made in countries like Australia, where, for example, in certain oncology clinics, physical exercise is part of the oncology treatment, because doctors notice that physical exercise increases the efficacy of radiation or chemotherapy. And also, I know that the National Society of Oncology in Australia has issued guidelines encouraging women to include physical exercise as a mandatory part of their daily routine in order to prevent breast cancer specifically, and also other types of cancer. We live in a society where we are bombarded with the message, the subliminal message that we need to consume, and most of the things we consume increase our risk of diseases. And bad fats are in this category. Bad fats. I believe that today we are living this revolution, this rehabilitation of fat, and the ketogenic diet has become so popular and continues to be so popular, and I'm going to dedicate an entire video to it. But what hasn't changed is that bad fats are extremely harmful to our health, whether they're part of the ketogenic diet or not. And bad fats come into two shapes, let's say, saturated fat and trans fat. And I like to refer to saturated fat as the bad and the trans fats as the pure evil. And trans fats were banished by certain countries like Austria, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, because they are considered poisonous to our health. And I really wish all the countries on the planet adopted this measure. We can get away with a moderate consumption of saturated fat, but even saturated fat, a consumption of more than 10 or 12 grams of saturated fat daily is increasing our risk for getting Alzheimer's. And before providing more details about the studies that have been performed and that observe this correlation between fats and Alzheimer's, I would like to clarify three preconceived ideas about the fat and the brain. The first one is that, contrary to what the promoters of the ketogenic diet are saying, ketones are not the optimal preferred fuel source for the brain. And I spent a lot of time researching this topic. Glucose is the optimal and the preferred fuel source for the brain, not fat. And I know that many people are going to be disappointed, but I'm really going to make a video and discuss this. So glucose is what the brain needs in order to thrive. We cannot deprive the brain of glucose, and this does not mean that glucose has to come from sugar. No, glucose comes from the good carbohydrates that we really need in our diet. The second preconceived idea is that the fat from the rest of our body is somehow similar to the fat that our brain is made up of. The fat in the brain is a very specific type of fat. It's called structural fat, and it's not, unlike deposit fat on the body, it's not used as energy by the brain. It has a technical support function. And I'm going to explain this in a let's say in a very brief manner. Basically, the membranes which are wrapped around the axons require insulation, and this insulation is required in order to speed up the transmission of the electric impulses between the neurons. And this and the fat is performing this very vital function. It provides the insulation so that electric impulses travel up to 50 times faster between the neurons. This is why it's called structural fat. It provides technical support. And what's also important to note is that the fat in this membrane is mostly made up of omega-3 fatty acids. This is why it's so important to consume omega-3 for the health, the optimal health of our brain. And the third preconceived idea that I would like to clarify is that, contrary to what we can find on Google, fat does not account for more than 70% of the brain's total weight. It actually depends on the way that we are calculating it. If we include water in the equation, and we have to bear in mind that water represents 73-75% of the brain's total composition. If we include water, then fat accounts for 11% of the brain's weight. If we exclude water from the calculation, that fat accounts for not more than 50% of the brain's weight. I really wanted to clarify these aspects because I really believe that there are not many sources online that clarify why fat is important for the brain, and there is this misconception that fat represents the best energy source for the brain, and this is absolutely not true. And now back to our discussion about saturated fat and trans fats. And regarding saturated fat, I was reading Dr. Lisa Mosconi's books. I will link them below. They are fabulous books for Alzheimer's prevention, and she's quoting studies that show that the consumption of 10 to 12 grams of saturated fat daily is significantly increasing our risk for Alzheimer's disease, and this should really give us some food for thought. What I really wish I learned in school is the difference between saturated fat and unsaturated fat, especially because it's not very difficult to understand. Basically, saturation comes from whether the fat molecule is covered entirely or only partially in hydrogen. Obviously, unsaturated fat is covered only partially in hydrogen. This is why it's called unsaturated. And it's liquid at room temperature. It is more unstable. It is more fragile, and it is found mostly in plant sources like seeds, like avocados, like certain types of green leaves, for example, kale. And this is actually the type of fat that we really need in our diet, and it is plentiful in the Mediterranean diet, starting with the rock star, the famous olive oil. Saturated fat is found mostly in animal products, in full-fat dairy, full-fat milk, yogurt, cream, whipped cream, ice cream. It is found in fresh or processed meat, especially in pork, in lamb, in prosciutto, in salami, in mortadella, in all the delicious stuff, right? And it's really important to bear in mind that when we are eating some of our favorite animal products, like we are drinking milk or sour cream or yogurt, or we are consuming salami, a mortadella sandwich, we really need to think also in terms of how much saturated fat am I consuming on a daily basis. And I know we are not used to doing that, but it is important because in the long run, this accumulates and it can significantly increase our risk for Alzheimer's disease. But again, saturated fat is not pure evil, it's just bad in excess. We can get away with consuming 6 or 7 grams of saturated fat per day, and this is what again Dr. Lisa Mosconi explains in her brilliant books on Alzheimer's prevention. And now regarding trans fats, as I was saying, they were banned by certain countries, and I believe this is absolutely brilliant. And one question would be, why were trans fats invented? So basically trans fats become trans fats by adding hydrogen to vegetable unsaturated oils until they become saturated. And this makes them really advantageous, especially for restaurants, because they are refrying products in trans oils. They are making the products less perishable, and they're also making the products a lot creamier. I am a vegan, and I'm very cautious when I'm purchasing any vegan spreads, like substitutes or alternatives for cheese spreads, because they're usually very high in trans fats. Dr. Lisa Mosconi is quoting a study that actually established that consuming as little as 2 grams of trans fats daily is doubling our risk of developing Alzheimer's, and this is absolutely major. So where do we find this pure evil, this modern poison? We find trans fats in hard margarines, in vegetable shortenings. We find it in hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oils, especially sunflower oil, soybean, cottonseed, palm oil, in cheese and vegetable creams, which are very creamy and spreadable, in non-dairy coffee creamers, in commercially fried foods like fried chicken, fried fish, mozzarella sticks, French fries, in commercially baked goods, cookies, muffins, biscuits, pastries, croissants, unfortunately, pain au chocolat, in frozen foods like pizzas, fish sticks, in microwave popcorn, potato or corn chips. Lots of products which are plenty in supermarkets, and lots of products which are very common in the Western diet, unfortunately. In the next video, I'm going to talk about processed foods, and processed foods are another pure evil when it comes to our health and Alzheimer's prevention. So the main takeaway for today is that saturated fat needs to be consumed in moderation. We can get away with 6 to 7 grams of saturated fat per day. And yes, I do encourage you to measure what you are eating. It's so important to your health. And trans fats, this is a zero tolerance policy. Trans fats need to be out. They are poison. There are countries who banned trans fats from the food products. I'll see you in the next video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and you found it useful. Bye.